Welcome, folks, to this amazing conversation, which I already know it's amazing because I've already talked with Congressman Clay a couple times now. We are going to explore the National Bison Legacy Act. So, most Americans, most folks do not know that the bison is our national mammal, and yet it has a lot of teachings for us, and it's held in very high regard by many folks, not just naturalists, not just First Nations people, but as a symbol that can bring us together and help us create a more generative future. So we are very lucky today to have Congressman William Lacy Clay, who's been a public servant for what, 4 decades, 5 decades?
Or let's go with four.
Let's go with four. At the state level in Missouri, as a representative, as a state senator, but then in the U.S. House of Congress, where he's been involved with so many important pieces of legislation, not just the National Bison Legacy Act, but over his career, he's uh, served in the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the International Conservation Caucus, and the Congressional Arts Caucus, in addition to his committee assignments on financial services and the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. So he's had his fingers in the pot of our federal government and working to churn it towards a better future for, like I said, a couple decades. And you retired, left office in 2021. That's correct?
Yes, in January of 2021.
Mhm.
And first of all, Brandon, thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you
My
today
pleasure.
and just to kind of fill in the gaps
Please.
for you. Um, my public service career started in 1983. I ran for the Missouri State Legislature. I won a seat in the Missouri House of Representatives, served for 8 years, and then elevated to the Missouri State Senate, served there for 9 years, and went on and competed for a congressional seat in the 2000 election. So that was coincided with the Bush-Gore election.
Hmm.
Afterwards, served for 10 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. And by the way, I succeeded my father, Bill Clay, who was a founder of the Congressional Black Caucus and served for 32 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. And now I've started another career, and I'm with a global law firm, and I am a senior policy advisor for them.
Oh. And you had shared with me a couple interesting projects you're working on that positively impact the African American community within our nation. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about some of the fun work you're doing?
Yeah, I represent, I have a client that I represent, and that is a historically Black college
Hmm.
in my hometown, St. Louis, Missouri. And it is Harris Stowe State University. So we try to secure funding for that institution that has served the community for 100 years. Um, and we also represent the American Chiropractors Association with an effort towards getting legislation passed to cover more of the treatments that chiropractors
Hmm.
offer. And that's a lot of fun. And I mean, there are a variety of clients, financial services. One point that you left off is that I also served on the House Natural Resources Committee for 10 years. And I had requested to go on that committee, and at the time, Speaker Pelosi
Hmm.
uh, put me on the committee because I had two pieces of legislation that I was really interested in. One was the Bison legislation, and the other one was establishing a national civil rights trail, which we were successful in doing.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I've walked the one in Montgomery, but there's a national one as well.
Yeah, I was able to get it passed into law in early 2018, and President Trump signed it. I was
Wow.
able to find a Senate counterpart
Mhm.
who at the time was Tim Scott of South Carolina,
Oh,
and we were able to um, convince enough of our colleagues to vote in favor of it.
well done. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love, with your permission, just to dive right into the National Bison Legacy Act, because I think that is going to have a lot of interest to folks watching this and folks who are really concerned about the health of the United States, our strength of our democracy. Obviously, this is a pivotal election year. Um, so, okay to dive right in?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So you had mentioned Congresswoman Pelosi put you on the National Resources Committee,
Yes.
and that a big piece of that was the Bison Legacy Act. And I'm curious, like, how did this begin? I mean, I mean, you've got your own connection to the animal, but like, what was like? How did that conversation begin? That we said, yeah, let's have a national mammal. Let's call it let's
Yeah.
name the bison that.
Yeah, I was approached, oh God, I want to say in like 2010, 2012, by the Native American community. I want to say it was the Ocala Sioux tribe,
Mhm.
and I may or may not be right about that. But we started a conversation. They convinced me to introduce the legislation to designate the bison as our national mammal. And so I did my own research and realized uh, how important that animal has been to our country
Mhm.
and to the Native American community as well as to the settlers.
Mhm.
And it was, and it just made sense. I'm a big historian. I love American history, and I connected it to my family story too, with of course my ancestors being Buffalo soldiers,
Mhm.
and so uh, that was uh, that was part of the impetus to introduce the legislation, and of course the advocates. I also asked them to find me help to get
Mhm.
some of my colleagues to sign on, especially those from the West who had done a remarkable job of reviving um, the bison and to making it to bringing it back and bringing it whole,
Mhm.
so that more Americans could appreciate this majestic animal.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, there was, I believe, what the National Bison Association was involved, the Intertribal Buffalo Council,
Yeah,
and then you had co-sponsors with what Governor Nome now, who is then
yes,
a congresswoman, and I believe Congressperson Jason Chaffetz said some nice things as well. I'm
yeah,
just curious, like, this was done in 2016, or at least signed in 2016. You've been working on it for half a decade prior,
yeah.
and we're in the again another very contentious election year. How did you get everybody aligned? Like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to work together to do something that is not going to, necessarily move the needle on anything for either of us, but it's going to set a foundation that, will extend far beyond our lives. Like, what was that conversation like?
Well, first of all, I think it's insightful for the viewers to know that um, the wheels of government turn slowly.
Mhm.
And so you have to have an ability to be patient. Um, and you don't always succeed on the first try.
Right.
So you have to be persistent. You have to continuously reintroduce legislation that you don't pass in the previous Congress, reintroduce it in the next Congress.
Hmm.
And I learned that tactic back in my days in the state legislature.
Hmm.
As long as you don't give up and you stay persistent, you can be effective. And it's all about coalition building.
Hmm.
It's finding the sweet spot, finding um, a colleague that you may have something in common with. I mean, I made it a point in all three legislative bodies that I served time in to actually get to know an individual.
Hmm.
And I tried to get to know all of my colleagues and was pretty good at it. I guess that was part of my training during college.
Hmm.
I was my job in Congress was I was an assistant doorkeeper in the U.S. House of Representatives, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
And part of our training was to study the picture book and to learn each individual member by name, face, and state.
Hmm.
And so I kept that ability to be able to do that. And it worked in each legislative body. So I got to know people. And then I would probably research a little bit about them before I approached them. And that's how Jason Chaffetz and I became friends.
Hmm.
That's how Governor Nome and I got to know each other. Because I mean, I guess that's the difference
Yeah.
now as opposed to 20 years ago
Yeah.
of where it wasn't as strident and partisan as
Hmm.
it is today.
Right.
Um, I mean, actually, members came to Congress with a little less partisanship and more of a desire to uh, to deliver for their districts or their respective states.
Yeah.
And I think that we have gotten away from that. I think that the voters have really gotten away from that and don't hold their elected officials to that standard anymore. Why I cannot explain. But I'm going to be very candid with you today. So as we go
Please.
into this questioning, I'm going to share some insights with you that you may or may not agree with, but let's move forward.
Yeah. I love it.
Okay.
um, and then, as this bill is starting to take shape, and you're, getting it, socializing it with, key members within, the House and the Senate. I mean, I'm curious, like, how did you communicate the centrality or the importance of the bison being the national mammal that we should elevate above all others? Like, what was it that kind of grabbed hold of folks? Did they just like love you and like trust you, and they're like, all right, if Bill says this is right, then we're going to do this? And or what was it that had them be like, okay, let's name this thing?
Well, different methods work on different people. And I really, those outside advocacy groups were very helpful
Hmm.
because they had their own contacts within the House of Representatives and within the Senate, and they were very effective.
Hmm.
They would do a big reception annually in the office buildings, invite all of the members from their respective states, um, and also just me talking one on one with my colleagues. And some would ask, "Well, what's your interest in this? You represent a urban and suburban area.
Yeah.
How did you get connected to the Bison?" and and depending on who it was, I would, tell them, look, I was once a student at Howard University, and their symbol, their
Bison.
mascot is the bison. So that would subdue some in the Congressional Black Caucus and get buy-in from them or from even my own state delegation.
Mhm.
And I would uh, find a connection to rural Missouri, and those members of Congress from Missouri that represented rural parts of the state, and tell them, look, um, you've got a rancher down there raising
Mhm.
bison in your district, and that would kind of convince them.
Yeah.
And so then I was able to go find co-sponsors that way too.
Mhm.
And um, the more co-sponsors you gather for legislation, the more, and especially bipartisan list of co-sponsors, the more the leadership realizes, okay, this is a piece of legislation we can fast track. And we have in the House, there's uh, what is called a suspension calendar,
Mhm.
which is more of a suspension of the rules, but it requires a 2/3 uh,
Majority.
majority of those voting to pass and to send on to the Senate. And we were able to convince enough people. I mean, it's not really controversial. I don't think the subject is. And so that was a way to sell the concept.
It's great. I mean, what I'm hearing in a lot of that is diligence, creativity, resourcefulness, and just being with people, like in the way that kind of Cesar Chavez was like, talk to one person, talk to another, and like get them to show up. And then, you get the numbers, you get the coalition, and then it gets put to a vote on the floor, and you just like kind of like walk us through like nobody was like, I oppose the bison, they are terrible, and the blah blah blah. Like there was no opposition, right? It was just like, yes, this is a great thing, let's do it. It's like,
Yeah,
please
first
tell us what
first
happened.
it had one thing you left out was it has to come out of a committee.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
you have to get a majority vote there. Uh, and then that's how you get it to the floor calendar.
Mhm.
Uh, and I want to say the voting committee was unanimous, so that streamlined it to go on to the suspension calendar.
Mhm.
And then you just wait your turn. You wait
Mhm.
for the day for them to call the
Mhm.
calendar up, and then the vote occurs. Sometimes it's just a voice vote that passes this.
Mhm.
Other times it's a recorded vote.
Yeah.
And so I don't quite recall if it was recorded a voice, but then we were able to get it to the Senate, and that's when Tim Scott picked it up. See, was it Tim? No, no, it wasn't Tim. I'm trying to think who was it. It had to be a senator from Montana or North or South Dakota.
Mhm. Mhm.
It escapes me now,
Okay.
but they
Yeah.
were able to pick it up and pass it through, and then it went on to the White House for
Yeah.
President Obama's signature. It
And
didn't hurt that and Obama and I were friends, so
Mhm.
uh, he was willing to sign the legislation into law.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Now, I mean, it pretty much sailed through both houses, right? And then your connection with President Obama is like, yes, let's do this. I'm curious, like, because I remember reading about this in the paper in 2016, and then, but there wasn't really any official statement from the White House or President Obama saying anything. I'm curious, is the bison something that he's personally connected to, or was he just like, this is the will of the people, let's make it happen?
yeah. I think it's more of the will of the people, and they have a vetting process too for
Hmm.
every bill that gets to his desk.
Hmm.
And I'm sure his staff looked at it, looked at the supporters of the legislation, saw it was bipartisan, and decided, yes, this is one that deserves his signature.
Wonderful. Well,
Mhm.
again, on behalf of all Bison geeks, on behalf of the Bison, thank you for half a
You're
decade worth
welcome.
of creativity and conversation. Now,
Okay.
I'm curious. Like now that we're, I guess about 8 years after the passage of the law,
Mhm.
and in this, unique time in our nation's history, like what kind of relevance do you think the Bison has today, 2024? What do you intuit?
I think that there are enough Americans who appreciate this majestic animal, whether you are indigenous people, whether you are tourists, whether you live and cohabitate with the
Hmm.
bison, or whether you're rancher, farmer, whatever. They are they connect to it. They realize that for the most part, I think people realize that the bison are part of American culture, and that they have an appreciation for the fact that we have preserved them, we have brought them back,
Hmm.
and I think that that says a lot about our nation and how we can come together and rally around certain causes,
Yeah.
which also is an indication that um, if we can rally around the bison as our national mammal, then we should be able to rally around much tougher issues also.
Amen. Well, I want to actually get into that here in a second.
Sure.
Um, but I'm also curious, like, because it's not like the bison's a raccoon where people have strong opinions one way or the other about it. It's almost folks have, regardless of how they vote or how they make love or where they live, nobody's like, oh, like against it. Is there? I'm curious, as a symbol that just about everyone can find their way into. I mean, what do you think could be done going forward, like to bring folks together under some kind of Bison myth or set of ethics or image or symbol? I mean, what do you think we could do about this?
uh, I have not, Brandon, I have not given that much thought.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. I think that you can hold up the bison as a way to make our country and planet uh, more ecologically sound,
Mhm. Sure.
more as a symbol of how we uh, restore our environment and how we come back from almost extinction,
Yeah.
and to put it in an ecological or environmental sense.
Mhm.
I think that would be one of the symbols that would come to mind for me,
Yeah.
to hold up to the American public and say, look, we can do this. We can clean up our planet. We can clean up our wildlife and our forest.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Well, it's. I know that like prophecy wasn't part of like the discussion on the House floor or anything like that,
Mhm,
but that we did bring the bison back. We did realize the error of our ways. Again, it's one of our sins, maybe not, or not as big of a sin as say native genocide or
mhm,
slavery, but we've
mhm,
we've done it before. We've recognized the error of our ways and
mhm.
tacked back towards the center. And so, like, I'm curious, like, can that narrative actually bring us back to our core principles, to our purpose? Like, we've done this before. This is a symbol of how we've done it before together, uh, in a bipartisan manner. I'm just curious, like, what do you hear in that?
Well, I am. I am more of a political realist.
Hmm.
And so in the political realm, you have to have willing parties, people that are willing to come to the table
Hmm.
and to have a truthful conversation. In other words, um, both sides have to be willing to sit down, hear the other side out, and to let those issues and to try to resolve the issues that each side puts on the table in a honest and truthful way.
Hmm. Yeah. So if we are able to get them together,
Mhm.
potentially we could allow the guys the bison to guide or shape that reconnection. Um,
Yeah.
so I want to switch gears a little bit, moving more towards reflecting on your time in Congress,
Mhm.
leading up, I mean, through 20-year, pretty critical period through Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump. Um, as you think about, the purpose of the United States, some would say that it's, Lincoln would say that it's our the central tenet is all created equal. Or some folks might say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or some might say e pluribus unum. I'm curious, reflecting back on that time, how present was our purpose in kind of guiding, what gets to the floor, what gets passed, what gets socialized, and I mean, was there like a central guiding light, like, hey, this is what we're about, like let's pass this legislation because it will create more of that.
Well, I'll share with you my experience. I
Hmm.
came in after the 2000 election. So for 8 years, George Bush was our president.
Hmm.
We didn't agree on quite a few things. One was the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think that Iraq was a total tragedy that could have been avoided. When you think about Iraq prior to 9/11, it was one of the most advanced nations in the Middle East, with culture, with education, had a lot of colleges and things like that. A society that was functioning properly.
Hmm.
And then we destroyed all of that. We bombed the universities, the cultural centers,
Hmm.
um, and left a mess. And
Yeah.
we didn't have to. We really could have avoided it. They did not attack us. I think some of that had to do with vengeance on the part
Hmm.
of President Bush. It was regrettable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and then And then, of course, you saw the effects of ISIS. The outgrowth of that attack
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
Iraq brought us ISIS,
Yeah.
um, which radicalized a lot of those Muslim nations. And that was a tragedy.
Yeah.
Then came 8 years of Obama.
Hmm.
And Obama was uh, groundbreaking in the sense that uh, he finally accomplished what presidents had been trying to accomplish since Harry Truman, and that was a national health care
Hmm.
program. And
Right.
when we have passed the Affordable Care Act, I think that was probably the most important piece of legislation I voted for in 20 years. It gave
Hmm. Hmm.
tens of millions of Americans some type of health care coverage, which I think has helped this nation and made
Oh,
us health,
massively. Yeah.
yeah, has made us a healthier place. And then my last 4 years were under the Trump administration. Um, and I guess, in fairness, things were going well
Hmm.
until March of 2020.
Hmm.
And then it started cascading with COVID-19, then the George Floyd murder, uh, and that really set this country back.
Yeah. So as you think about, a critical piece of legislation like affordable health care, I mean that
Mhm.
maps incredibly nicely to like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Yes.
People can take care of themselves, get care when they need it, experience more life, longer life, better life, more
Yep.
freedom because their bodies work, so greater liberty. And theoretically, if you're not in pain or if you're fully able, you're moving towards greater levels of happiness, fulfillment. So I mean that one seems like it maps like beautifully well. And President Obama was good in I think as a what Robert Bella might call like the minister of the civic faith, saying like this is what we're about, and
Yeah.
this is what we're doing about it. I'm curious, are there other examples like that where folks evoke these like this deeper purpose, like these deeper principles, and say,
Yeah.
this is who we are as Americans, this is what it means to live here, and this is what we're going to do about
Yeah. Let me share with you two examples, and this is both under the Obama administration. One was in 2014. Uh, I had the misfortune of representing Ferguson, Missouri, um, on the date that Michael Brown was killed by a Ferguson police officer.
it. Hmm.
And then, of course, a movement started, a movement for social justice and criminal justice reform. And but I wasn't alone because from President Obama throughout his administration, they also wanted to dig deeper and try to resolve some of the thorniest issues that we face in American society, beginning with racism. So he was he put the full weight of his administration behind our efforts to resolve some of those issues that stem from Ferguson. One, he sent out Attorney General Eric Holder.
Hmm.
We huddled. We were able to get the we were able to get a what they call a consent decree
Hmm.
signed into agreement by all the parties involved, um, with the state of Missouri, the city of Ferguson, and to change the way um, they enforce the law in
Right.
that community. There were all kind of abuses
Hmm.
that we were able to address in that consent decree. And so to this day, I am forever grateful to the Obama administration for working with me.
Hmm.
Uh, my colleague at the time was he represented Minnesota, who's now the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison.
Hmm.
He came to St. Louis with me. We were able to go to campaign door to door with candidates in Ferguson to run for the city council. And because they
Wow.
had, yeah, it was a city that was 80% African American, and they had one council member that was African American out of seven. So we were
Wow.
able to get in to put a majority of African Americans after that first election, after that summer of 2014. And then the next year, we were able to elect an African American mayor so that the representation truly reflected the
Hmm.
makeup of the community.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I was grateful for. The other thing is probably more parochial. Um,
Hmm.
I was able to fly on Air Force One in the summer of 2015 with President Obama, just he and I, and then his staff, of course. But we had a long talk on that flight from Washington to Kansas City, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to secure uh, a commitment from him to help me um, locate one of our spy agencies in the heart of the community, in the underserved part of St. Louis City, the
Mm-hmm.
National Geospatial Administration.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
run the satellites and stuff for the intelligence community.
Wow.
And that was a $1.8 billion infusion into the district that I represent.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was, I mean, those are things that you take with you for the rest of your life,
Mm-hmm.
and that you establish that kind of relationship with people, and that's the payoff for
Yeah.
your community.
But and I as I think both about your community, but also again about the principles of the United States, like those map beautifully to all created equal. Like equal representation in the law, equal representation within elected government,
Yeah,
and then also equality of opportunity, bringing high paying, highly skilled
yeah,
jobs that
yeah,
make the nation safer to communities that are underserved. I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of the whole point, in my view. Like,
I never heard it put like that, but you're correct.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's important to kind of like to mine these examples of like this is when we lived our principles, especially now in
Yeah,
this crazy summer election season. Who knows what's going to happen over the next 12, 18 months, but there are these moments of our very recent past where we committed to something that is bigger than ourselves, these principles,
right.
and did it. Like it works.
Yeah, and we can succeed. We
Mhm.
can come together as a nation. And, getting into what I call real talk,
Mhm.
if we're ever going to um, address the issue of racism in an
Mhm.
honest, straightforward way, um, we have to. I mean, I think about what the rhetoric that I hear, even on both sides of that issue. And the rhetoric that I hear is that the white community feels as though um, Black people should get over slavery. And I agree. We
Mhm.
should, but both sides have to overcome slavery from
Mhm.
a Black perspective, and we have to move forward. But from a white perspective, in order for us as a nation to get over slavery, then we have to stop practicing what this nation inflicted upon African Americans during slavery. We
Yeah.
have to stop discriminating. We have to start looking at each other in a different way. And what I mean by that is, um, you know, slavery was driven by economics,
Mhm.
and somebody was giving free labor to enrich someone else.
Mhm.
So let's first deal with the economics of it, and that would be, in other words, industry needs to stop redlining, and
Mhm.
by industries I mean the banking industry, the insurance industry. Those are all factors that inhibit economic advancement for the
Mhm.
Black community, and so if um, if America is going to get over slavery, then we have to be truthful. We have to have this conversation and change how we interact with each other. And you start by being fair in your hiring practices,
Hmm.
being fair in the banking practices and home ownership in your educational system, and allowing the African American community to actually build wealth.
Hmm.
That's what I mean. That's what inhibits um, the Black community quite
Hmm.
a bit. Is that the economic freedom is not there.
Right.
And so, I mean, we made strides. We don't have segregation anymore. You know, we have certain laws on the books that
I
we don't have
mean,
legal
uh, we're
segregation.
we're voluntarily segregating, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
right. We don't have legal segregation
Yeah.
anymore, sanctioned by the state and the federal government. Uh, but are other um, there are other impediments
Hmm.
that the Black community encounters on a daily basis, whether it's on the job, um, whether it's where you can purchase a home, or where you can send your children to school.
Yeah.
We as a nation have to have a real conversation about, okay, how do we address these issues? How do
Hmm.
we resolve them?
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge that we are going to encounter as a nation over the next decade or two.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, again, kind of take this back to the purpose. Like all created
Mhm.
equal,
Mhm.
and we have legislation that states in the affirmative that we're equal. We have equal access, equal protection, equal access to rights, resources, and um, it's not fulfilled. Our political economy doesn't really do it well. I mean, we're making strides.
Mhm.
There are lots of things in the recent Inflation Reduction Act that start to level the playing field a little bit more. Um, but I love how you brought in the private sector, because if you think about
Yeah.
the different ways our institutions touch our citizens, the private sector has got overwhelming influence in terms of the lived experience of all created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and frankly, the most to gain from diversity, from diverse teams, from having employee populations, customer populations, investor populations match each other, as opposed to like all your investors are white, all your leaders are white,
Mhm.
and all your low level employees are people of color, and but
Mhm.
then like 60% or 70% of your customers are women or people of color. Like so,
Yeah.
similar to kind of the the equity that you did in Ferguson in terms of the representation of
Mhm.
mayor, police chief, council, all that.
Right.
Um,
And Brandon, that gets into the culture of our country.
mhm,
You know
mhm,
and that's probably um, where the toughest conversations will occur.
mhm.
And it's very difficult to change culture,
Yeah.
and so um, but if you are persistent, you can,
Mhm,
and you can bring both sides closer
mhm.
if you make the case for change. And
Yeah,
change is difficult at times.
yeah, yeah. And then I totally agree. And I think this conversation is part of that culture conversation. I mean, you and I are not talking about policy. We're not talking about election. We're not talking about people. Like, how do
Yeah.
we become? Because we're all great people to our families, our neighbors, friends. We're loyal, we're dependable, we're generous, compassionate, curious, resourceful. All these things, and yet when it comes to extending ourselves beyond our
Mhm.
identity group, whatever that is, straight, gay, white,
Mhm.
black, male, female, urban, rural, rich, poor, the compassion like falls off a cliff. So, as a covenantal nation, like one that lives by our agreements, like how do
Mhm.
we actually have that same, beautiful human American spirit that we practice in our, our zone of interest, our group identity, outside of that group identity? Like what are we going to do about this? How can the government help? How can businesses help? How can churches help? How can education, like, what are we going to do to bring this love out into all these different interactions?
Well, people have to take a leap of faith, whether you're a business person, you own a corporation, or whether um, you live in a neighborhood that's integrated or not. You have to take a leap of faith. You have to try different things. And again, that gets back to the point. Okay, people resist change.
Hmm.
People are not comfortable with change, but you have to be able to see um, the other person's view.
Hmm.
I mean, it's the same thing. I think about the whole decision around Roe v. Wade
Hmm.
and how for 5 decades women had a choice and could make a decision
Hmm.
on what to do about their bodies, about their fertility and their conceiving. And then in 2022, the Supreme Court said no more, which is really a culture shock
Hmm.
for women who are childbearing age and for future generations.
And the
And
precedent it
yeah,
sets.
and I'm really like, how do we how do we get back to a conversation? I mean, pretty much the two sides have dug in their heels.
Hmm. Yeah.
You had a pro-choice side that had said that realizes they have to fight, they have to try to change the politics of this nation, and they have to be ready if there's a Supreme Court opening. Then you have the pro-life side who has decided we're going to go back 50 years
Hmm.
and you will no longer be able to make the sole decision
Hmm.
about your body, or nor will your physician.
Yeah.
And so it's that is one that's going to take a lot of soul searching on the part of this country to resolve.
So, Congressman Clay, as we move to the close of our time, I want to invite, well, everyone watching, listening, to think about this question, and then I'm going to proffer an answer, and I'm going to invite Congressman Clay to close us out as well. When was the time you felt most American? And so for me, when I think about that, I was just triggered by what you said about, Roe v. Wade being overturned. When I found out about it, I was in an airport coming back to California, and was on a connecting flight, and nobody, or at the airport in between connections, and nobody seemed to be like up in arms. And I was freaking out because I was like, "Ugh," like, I've got to do something. We got to find a protest, a vigil. We got to find something. So, send out a bunch of texts and emails like, what are we going to do? And luckily there was a beautiful vigil rally in front of the courthouse in San Diego, right as I landed. So I got home, went straight to it. It was one of the most beautiful American experiences I've ever had. People,
Mhm.
yeah, obviously from Planned Parenthood, people from women's organizations, but the solidarity across labor, across Black Lives Matter, across the Farm Growers Association. I mean, it was just like everybody who loves the concept of America, where all can fulfill their potential
Mhm.
regardless of who they are and what they look like and pray and all that. It was probably the most, like, 2 hours, or the most healing, inspiring 2 hours I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what is that moment for you, Congressperson Clay? Like, wait, what is the moment where you're like, yes, this is what it's about?
I think I don't know. I guess I'll give you two examples. One is more on a personal level. The day I took the oath of office to in the U.S. House of Representatives, my father was sitting beside me
Mm,
on one side, and my daughter, who was 6 years old, was on the other. And standing up, taking the oath, I turn around, see my dad, and a tear dropped down his cheek. And so that was a truly American experience for me. And then I guess the more uh, broader experience would have to be the day I was in the White House and President Obama signed the Affordable Care Law
mm.
Act into law. So that was an experience that said, this is what America is about, how we help others, how we bring us together for the overall good of this country. And so those are two experiences for me.
Wow. Thank
Yeah.
you for vulnerably sharing those. In
Yeah.
in that first moment, I mean, that's like it's almost like the wedding ceremony. Like you are getting married to the United States. And of course, you've got the proud papa and proud daughter and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you actually have, well, the hard work it takes to fulfill a marriage in getting Affordable Care Act passed. Like that's
Sure.
serious structural change that has,
Mhm.
there's probably, I don't know, at least 1 million people walking around today who probably wouldn't be without that. So blessings, honor,
Probably
reverence to
30 to
all.
40 million people that would
Yeah,
not
yeah,
have it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, Congressman Clay, thank you so much for your time and for your life of service and continued service to fulfilling the great purpose of this nation. I'm so honored to have had this time with you today.
Brandon, this was excellent. Thank you so much. And please stay in touch.
I will. I will.
You take care.